I'm Amber Wilson, 32, a tech entrepreneur with a story that still makes my chest tighten. My phone buzzed yesterday with Heather's name, my sister who I've barely spoken to in years. She was sobbing about our family's financial disaster. Instantly, I was transported back 14 years when I discovered she'd stolen my entire $45,000 college fund for a shopping spree. The worst part? My family laughed it off as just Heather being Heather. Now they need my help. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to join me on this journey of betrayal and justice. Growing up in Portland, Oregon shaped me in ways I'm still discovering. Our middle-class neighborhood was filled with tidy homes and carefully maintained lawns. My parents, Mark and Rachel Wilson, worked hard to provide for us. Dad managed a furniture store downtown, and Mom taught third grade at the local elementary school. They were respected in the community, active in the PTA, and seemed like model parents to outsiders. But inside our home, the dynamic was painfully different. From my earliest memories, the pattern was clear. Heather, my sister 3 years older than me, was the golden child. I was the afterthought. When Heather performed in school plays, my parents sat front row, cameras ready. When I won the state science fair in 8th grade, they couldn't attend because Heather had a hair appointment they couldn't possibly reschedule. Our personalities couldn't have been more different. Heather was outgoing, charismatic, and knew exactly how to charm adults. Her room was plastered with posters of boy bands and movie stars. She was popular, always surrounded by friends, and dated the captain of the football team. I was the quiet, bookish one who preferred the library to parties. My sanctuary was my small bedroom with its overflowing bookshelf and desk where I studied late into the night. Amber, why can't you be more like your sister? Became the unofficial family motto. Heather made average grades, but was praised endlessly. I maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA, but was told I should try to have more fun. When Heather failed algebra, Mom hired a tutor and blamed the teacher. When I skipped a grade in math, it was barely acknowledged. The disparity in our treatment was striking, but I found my path forward. While Heather spent weekends at the mall with friends, I volunteered at the hospital and took community college classes. I knew education was my ticket to independence. My dream was Stanford University's computer science program. The technology world was exploding, and I wanted to be part of it. My saving grace came from my grandparents. Mom's parents, who had always treated me with special kindness, perhaps seeing what was happening. Grandpa Wilson had been a mathematics professor, and we shared a special bond over logic puzzles and chess games. When I was 12, they established a college fund specifically for me. "You have a brilliant mind, Amber," Grandpa told me during our last Christmas together. "We want to make sure you have every opportunity to develop it." They contributed $45,000 to an account that my parents would manage as trustees until I turned 18. It was their life savings, and it meant everything to me. The college fund became my beacon of hope. Whenever Heather received new clothes while I got hand-me-downs, I reminded myself about Stanford. When my 16th birthday party was canceled because Heather had an impromptu beach weekend with friends, I comforted myself by calculating how much interest my college fund was accruing. There were countless warning signs about Heather's entitlement. When she was 16, she crashed Dad's car while joyriding with friends. Instead of consequences, she received a used car of her own. "She needs to get to her activities safely," Mom explained. When she maxed out Mom's credit card buying clothes, they paid it off without hesitation. "She's just learning about money," Dad said with a shrug. My strategy was clear: excel academically, build a resume that would earn scholarships, and get out. I became editor of the school newspaper, president of the computer club, and volunteered tutoring underprivileged kids. Every achievement was a stepping stone toward freedom. Senior year arrived with promise. My application to Stanford was perfect, Top scores, glowing recommendations, and a personal essay about developing an algorithm to help the hospital volunteer program operate more efficiently. The acceptance letter came on a rainy April morning. I stood in the driveway, the prestigious envelope in my trembling hands, rain mixing with tears of joy on my face. That night, I expected at least some acknowledgement of my achievement. Instead, dinner conversation revolved entirely around Heather's breakup with her boyfriend. When I finally managed to mention Stanford, Mom said, "That's nice, honey." "Heather, do you want more potatoes?" Still, I had my plan. With my college fund and a partial scholarship, I could afford Stanford's tuition. I spent the summer working at the local tech repair shop, saving every dollar for books and living expenses. I researched housing options, joined Stanford's student forums, and mapped out my class schedule. For once, my future felt completely within my control. 2 weeks before I was scheduled to leave for California, I visited the bank to withdraw the funds for my tuition payment. What happened next changed everything. The bank manager's expression should have been my first clue. When I presented my ID and asked to access my college fund to pay my Stanford tuition, his face fell. "I'm sorry, Ms. Wilson, but that account was emptied 3 months ago," he said, checking his computer screen with furrowed brows. "There must be a mistake," I insisted, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. "My grandparents set up that account specifically for my education. It had $45,000 in it." He turned the monitor toward me. The balance read $0. The transaction history showed a complete withdrawal made by Rachel Wilson, my mother, who was a co-trustee on the account. The drive home that day remains vivid in my memory. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind raced through possibilities. Perhaps there was an error. Maybe they'd moved the money to a different account with better interest rates. Deep down, I knew better. When I arrived home, both my parents' cars were in the driveway, along with Heather's BMW. I hadn't even known she was visiting from her apartment across town. The moment I walked through the door, I could hear laughter from the kitchen. They were having lunch together, a spread of takeout containers on the table. "What happened to my college fund?" I asked without preamble. The laughter stopped. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me with varying degrees of guilt, though not nearly enough. "Oh, honey," Mom began, setting down her fork. "We were going to talk to you about that." "About what exactly?" My voice was eerily calm. Dad cleared his throat. "There was a temporary situation that came up. We had to use those funds, but we're planning to replace them." Heather suddenly became very interested in her salad. "What situation?" I pressed. The silence that followed confirmed my worst fears. Finally, Heather spoke up, her tone casual as if discussing borrowing a sweater. "I had some expenses. Mom and Dad helped me out with your fund, but I'll totally pay you back someday." What expenses could possibly justify taking my entire college fund? The calm in my voice was evaporating. That's when the full story emerged in bits and pieces between awkward glances. Heather had gone on a 3-month spending spree. Designer clothes. A luxury vacation to Las Vegas with friends. A down payment on a new BMW to replace her embarrassing, used model. Home decor for her apartment. The list went on. "You spent my education money on clothes and a car?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Don't be so dramatic, Amber," Heather rolled her eyes. "You can take out loans like everybody else. It's not like you won't get an education." I turned to my parents, waiting for them to express outrage, to defend me, to promise immediate action to rectify this theft. Instead, Dad said, "Your sister had some important needs. We'll figure something out for your tuition." Important needs? Like what? A trip to Vegas? A car she can't afford? My voice was rising now. Mom reached for my hand across the table. I pulled away. "Sweetie, you're smart. You can get scholarships. You'll figure it out." That money was from Grandpa and Grandma. They wanted me to go to Stanford. It was their dying wish. My voice cracked. "They would have wanted to help both their granddaughters," Mom said, her tone suggesting this was a reasonable position. Heather needed a boost to get established. The most surreal moment came later that evening. We were sitting at dinner, the conversation having moved on as if my future hadn't just been demolished. Heather was describing her Vegas trip, laughing about how she and her friends had upgraded to a luxury suite. "You should have seen it, paid for by the Bank of Amber," she joked, and to my horror, my parents chuckled. Dad raised his glass in a mock toast to Amber's contribution to the family economy. They were laughing. Actually laughing about the theft of my future. I pushed away from the table and went to my room. For hours, I sat in shocked silence, staring at the Stanford acceptance letter pinned to my bulletin board. The next morning, I called the university's financial aid office to explain my situation. The sympathetic counselor outlined my options: massive loans that would take decades to repay, or deferring enrollment until I could save enough money. Stanford was slipping away. Their partial scholarship wouldn't come close to covering what I needed without the fund. State University became my only viable option. I could live at home to save money, a prospect that now felt like imprisonment. A week later, I made the hardest call of my life to Stanford's admissions office, declining my spot in the freshman class. The same day, I applied to Portland State University, where I could afford tuition by working full-time alongside my studies. The night before what should have been my departure for Stanford, I sat alone in my room surrounded by the college supplies I'd carefully purchased over the summer. The Stanford sweatshirt I'd bought with my first paycheck. The dorm room decorations chosen with such excitement. The laptop I'd saved for, perfect for computer science studies. In that moment, I made a decision that would define the next decade of my life. I would excel despite them, not because of them. And once I achieved independence, I would never allow my family to hurt me again. The next morning, I moved my essential belongings to a tiny studio apartment I'd found near Portland State. I left a note: "I'll make my own way now. Don't contact me unless it's to return what was stolen." It would be years before I spoke to them again. My new apartment was barely larger than my childhood bedroom. A futon served as both bed and couch, a card table functioned as my desk, and a hot plate was my kitchen. The bathroom was so small I could touch all four walls without moving. But it was mine, and that made it beautiful. Portland State University wasn't Stanford, but I was determined to extract every ounce of value from my education. While other students complained about 8 a.m. classes, I was already on campus by 6:30 each morning, using the computer lab before my first class. Between classes, I worked at the campus tech support center. Evenings and weekends, I waited tables at a restaurant near my apartment. Sleep became a luxury I rarely enjoyed. My schedule was punishing. Monday through Friday, I attended classes from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., worked at tech support until 6 p.m., then waited tables until midnight. Saturdays and Sundays, I pulled double shifts at the restaurant. Homework happened between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. most nights. I survived on coffee and determination. The turning point came during my sophomore year when I took an advanced programming class with Professor Jennifer Collins. Unlike most professors who lectured to a sea of anonymous faces, she noticed individual students. After I aced her notoriously difficult midterm, she asked me to stay after class. "You have exceptional talent," she said, studying me with intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. "But you look exhausted. What's your story, Amber?" Something about her genuine interest broke through my carefully constructed walls. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything: the stolen college fund, working multiple jobs, my estrangement from family. She listened without interruption, her expression shifting from surprise to outrage to determination. "Come to my office hours tomorrow," she said when I finished. "I have some ideas." Professor Collins became the mentor I desperately needed. She helped me apply for additional scholarships I hadn't known existed. She recommended me for a paid research assistant position that paid better than my restaurant job and provided valuable experience. Most importantly, she pushed me to think beyond just surviving. "You're not just trying to get a degree," she told me. "You're building the foundation for an exceptional career. Think bigger." Under her guidance, I focused my studies on emerging areas of software development. While my classmates aimed for safe, established companies, I immersed myself in the cutting edge: artificial intelligence, machine learning, and predictive algorithms. I created a self-guided curriculum that went far beyond my required courses. By junior year, I had developed a prototype for inventory management software that used predictive analytics to optimize supply chains. Professor Collins encouraged me to enter it in a statewide innovation competition. To my shock, I won first place and $10,000 in seed funding. That money became my liberation fund. I quit the restaurant job and focused entirely on refining my software. Professor Collins introduced me to local business owners who agreed to beta test my system. The results exceeded even my expectations, reducing their inventory costs by an average of 32%. Graduation day arrived with no family in attendance. Professor Collins sat in the front row, cheering loudly when I was recognized with highest honors. Afterward, she handed me a small gift box containing a business card holder with my name engraved on it. "For all the connections you're about to make," she said with a knowing smile. Rather than pursuing traditional employment, I took a calculated risk. I used my competition winnings and a small business loan to launch my own company, PredictX Software Solutions. The early days were terrifying. My apartment became my office, my bed serving as conference table during client meetings. I survived on ramen and determination. My first major contract came 6 months after launch. A regional grocery chain implemented my inventory system across their 23 stores. When the quarterly results showed a significant reduction in spoilage and improved profit margins, other businesses took notice. Suddenly, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. By year 3, I had moved into a proper office space and hired my first 5 employees. By year 5, PredictX had 30 employees and a downtown headquarters with a view of the Willamette River. My tiny studio apartment was replaced by a modern loft in Portland's Pearl District. The card table desk was upgraded to custom-designed furniture. The futon gave way to a king-sized bed with luxury linens. Financial security brought freedom I'd never known. I could buy books without checking prices. I could eat at restaurants without calculating tips based on what I could afford rather than service quality. I started investing, building wealth that would ensure I never depended on anyone again. Throughout these years, contact with my family remained minimal. Occasionally, Mom would text on birthdays or holidays. I responded politely but briefly. Dad never reached out directly. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard bits of family news. Dad's furniture store was struggling due to online competition. Mom had retired from teaching earlier than planned due to health issues. Heather's life played out on social media for all to see. She had married Ryan, a real estate agent with a perpetual tan and perfect teeth. Their wedding was lavish, with professional photographs showing my parents beaming proudly. They bought a large house in an upscale neighborhood they clearly couldn't afford. They posted endless photos of luxury vacations and expensive restaurant meals, always with carefully curated hashtags like #blessed and #livingthedream. When they announced the birth of their son, Nathan, I felt an unexpected pang. I had a nephew I would likely never know. I sent an anonymous gift basket to their home, but didn't include a card. Some boundaries weren't ready to be crossed. As my business thrived, I occasionally wondered if my family knew about my success. Portland's Business Journal had featured me in their 40 Under 40 list. Our company had been profiled in several tech publications. I wasn't famous, but in certain circles, the name Amber Wilson carried weight. I had built exactly what I'd wanted: a successful company, financial independence, and a life entirely on my terms. The wounds of betrayal had scarred over, though they still ached when prodded. I had everything I needed and no reason to look back. Then my phone rang, displaying a name I hadn't seen in years: Heather Wilson. Against my better judgment, I answered. Amber? Heather's voice was barely recognizable, choked with tears. I know I have no right to call you, but I don't know what else to do. I sat down at my kitchen island, instinctively bracing myself. What's going on, Heather? What followed was a 15-minute deluge of panic and desperation. Between sobs, Heather outlined a family financial disaster of epic proportions. The carefully curated social media life had been a complete facade. Dad's furniture store had finally gone under after years of declining sales. He'd made a series of increasingly risky investments trying to save it, leveraging their house and retirement accounts. All had failed spectacularly. At 63, he was now working as a cashier at a grocery store, making barely above minimum wage. Mom's early retirement had actually been a forced departure due to breast cancer diagnosis 3 years ago. Their insurance had covered the initial treatment, but the maintenance medications and follow-up care were draining what little savings they had left. Recent scans showed concerning spots that required additional testing not covered by their high-deductible plan. Their family home, where we had grown up, was 3 months into foreclosure proceedings. The bank had given them 30 days to catch up on payments or vacate. And us. God, Amber, we're just as bad, Heather continued, her voice cracking. Ryan's real estate business tanked during the downturn. We've been living on credit cards for 2 years. Our house is underwater by $100,000. The cars are both being repossessed next week. Then came the part that actually reached something inside me. Nathan, our son, he's 5 now. He has some developmental delays that require special therapy and educational resources. We can't afford any of it anymore, and he's starting to regress without support. The call continued with Heather becoming increasingly frantic. I know you hate me. You have every right to. What I did to you is unforgivable. I've thought about it every day for 14 years. I'm not asking for myself, but Mom and Dad are about to be homeless and Nathan needs help. When she finally paused for breath, I asked the question that had immediately come to mind. Why me? Why now? There was a long pause. Because you're the only one who ever had it together. And because I saw an article about your company in Business Weekly. It said you were worth millions now. Her voice became small. Is that true? I neither confirmed nor denied it. I need to think about this, Heather. Please, she whispered. I know I don't deserve your help, but they don't deserve to lose everything. After hanging up, I sat motionless at my kitchen island, watching the Portland skyline through my floor-to-ceiling windows. The setting sun cast long shadows across my carefully designed living space, all clean lines and minimalist decor. Everything in its place. Everything earned through my own efforts. I called Madison, my closest friend since college and now my company's marketing director. You won't believe who just called me, I began when she answered. After explaining the situation, I waited for her reaction. What are you thinking? She asked carefully. I don't know. Part of me wants to hang up on 14 years of silence and betrayal. Another part keeps thinking about a 5-year-old boy who had nothing to do with any of this. Madison was silent for a moment. Do you believe them? Could this be a scam to get money from you? The question had already occurred to me. Possibly. Heather was always manipulative. Then verify before you decide, Madison suggested. You have the resources to find out if this is real. She was right. Before making any decision, I needed facts, not emotional appeals. The next morning, I contacted a private financial investigator and gave him the details. I also booked a flight to Portland for the following week. I needed to see the situation with my own eyes. As I packed my suitcase, memories I'd suppressed for years came flooding back. The crushing disappointment of calling Stanford to decline my spot. The humiliation of working at the restaurant where some of my high school classmates dined. The lonely nights in my tiny apartment, exhausted but too anxious about money to sleep. And beneath it all, the fundamental betrayal. My sister stealing my future and my parents not only allowing it but laughing about it afterward. The casual cruelty still had the power to take my breath away. On the flight to Portland, I found myself staring at old family photos on my phone, ones I hadn't looked at in years. Behind every smile was a story I now questioned. Had there ever been true family love there, or just convenience and habit? The investigators' preliminary report arrived as my plane landed. It confirmed everything Heather had told me, plus additional debts she hadn't mentioned. The total financial hole my family had dug was approaching $340,000. They weren't just struggling, they were drowning. My rental car felt like a time machine as I drove through my old neighborhood. I parked a block away from my parents' house, watching from a distance. The once pristine lawn was overgrown. The white trim needed painting. An official-looking notice was taped to the front door, the foreclosure warning, presumably. As I watched, my father pulled into the driveway in an old sedan that had replaced his once proud SUV. He moved slowly now, his shoulders hunched as he carried grocery bags inside. He looked 20 years older than his age. I followed the investigators' addresses. My mother's medical center, where the receptionist confirmed she was indeed a cancer patient on a payment plan. The grocery store where my father now worked, watching him mechanically scan items with vacant eyes. Heather and Ryan's house in a neighborhood that had once been exclusive but was now showing signs of decline. And finally, Nathan's therapy center, where a kind therapist explained the importance of consistent treatment for his specific developmental needs. That night, in my hotel room, I finally broke down. Years of carefully controlled emotions burst through the dam I'd built. I sobbed until I couldn't breathe, for the young girl whose dreams had been stolen, for the family relationships that had been poisoned by favoritism and entitlement, and for the years of loneliness I'd endured as the price of my independence. When the tears finally stopped, I felt oddly clear-headed. The investigation had confirmed that the crisis was real. Now I had to decide. What, if anything, did I owe to the people who had hurt me so deeply? The financial investigator I hired, Carl Bennett, was thorough beyond my expectations. His complete report arrived in my hotel inbox the next morning, a detailed 40-page document outlining my family's financial situation with clinical precision. My father's furniture store had been struggling for years before finally closing 18 months ago. He had indeed made a series of increasingly desperate investments, including a restaurant franchise that never opened and a speculative real estate development that collapsed when the developer was indicted for fraud. These failures had wiped out not only his business assets, but also their retirement savings and home equity. Mom's medical situation was equally grim. Stage 2 breast cancer 3 years ago, now with concerning imaging that suggested possible recurrence. Their insurance was a high-deductible plan that left them responsible for thousands in out-of-pocket costs. She had been prescribed an expensive maintenance medication that they often couldn't afford, leading to dangerous gaps in treatment. Heather and Ryan's situation reflected years of living beyond their means. Their mortgage was underwater by $118,000, not the $100,000 Heather had claimed. Credit card debt exceeded $65,000 across 12 cards, all nearly maxed out. Ryan's real estate business had failed not just because of market conditions, but because of a lawsuit from clients who alleged misrepresentation on a property sale. Car loans, personal loans, and medical bills for Nathan's therapy created a perfect storm of financial catastrophe. Carl had even obtained their credit scores: Dad 540, Mom 560, Heather 480, Ryan 510. Financial ruin by any definition. The report also included something I hadn't requested, a psychological assessment of Nathan based on his medical and educational records. At 5 years old, he was diagnosed with a processing disorder that affected his speech and social development. With proper intervention, his prognosis was excellent. Without it, he faced significant challenges throughout his education and possibly beyond. Based on my investigation, Carl concluded This is not a scam to extract money from you. This is a genuine financial crisis affecting multiple family members with no clear path to resolution through conventional means. I spent the morning driving around Portland, retracing the steps of my youth. My high school now with a renovated facade. The library where I'd spent countless hours hiding from home tensions. The bank where I discovered my college fund was empty. Around noon, I found myself parked across from the grocery store where Dad worked. Through the window, I could see him at Register 3, mechanically scanning items for customers who never looked at his face. When his shift ended, I followed at a distance, watching him stop at a pharmacy to pick up prescriptions, then head home. My childhood home looked even worse up close. The garden Mom had once tended with pride was now overtaken by weeds. The blue paint was fading and peeling in places. Through the windows, I could see sparse furniture, suggesting they'd already sold pieces to cover expenses. I drove past Heather and Ryan's house next. Their luxury cars had been replaced by a single older sedan with visible body damage. Their son, my nephew Nathan, was playing in the front yard, struggling to catch a ball that Ryan gently tossed to him. Even from a distance, I could see the frustration on Nathan's face when the ball repeatedly slipped from his hands, and the patient encouragement from Ryan as he demonstrated the catching motion again. My final stop was a coffee shop where I had arranged to meet Susan Green, my parents' next-door neighbor for 20 years. She had no idea of my estrangement from the family and greeted me warmly. "Amber, it's been so long. Your parents must be thrilled to have you visiting." "They don't actually know I'm in town," I admitted. "I'm trying to understand what's happened to them before I reach out." Susan's expression shifted to concern. "It's been awful to watch, honestly. Your father was so proud. He tried to hide their troubles for a long time. Your mother's illness took such a toll on him. I bring casseroles over sometimes, but they barely have enough energy to maintain basic needs. And they never ask for help? Never. Your father especially seems ashamed of their situation. He was always the provider, you know? Now he bags groceries for people he used to consider peers. The humiliation is written all over his face." She hesitated, then added, "They talk about you, though. Your mother shows me articles about your company. There's one framed in their living room. This surprised me. They never reach out. Pride, maybe? Or shame. They made mistakes with you, didn't they?" Her directness caught me off guard. "Your mother has mentioned regrets, especially when she got sick. Cancer has a way of clarifying what matters." I left the meeting with Susan feeling more conflicted than ever. That evening, I organized all the information I had gathered into a comprehensive picture of my family's situation. The facts were undeniable. They were in genuine crisis with no way out. Whatever resentment I harbored, the reality of their suffering couldn't be dismissed. In my hotel room, I opened my laptop and looked at my own financial situation. The company valuation at our last funding round had put my net worth at just over $12 million. I had the means to resolve their entire financial disaster without significantly impacting my own security. The question wasn't whether I could help, but whether I should. And if so, how? I thought about Nathan, who had no part in past betrayals, but was suffering their consequences. I thought about my mother's cancer, and how fear and pain must be compounding her financial stress. I even thought about Heather, whose tearful phone call suggested a level of regret I hadn't believed her capable of feeling. That night, I drafted multiple plans, each approaching the situation from a different angle. By morning, I had made my decision. This wouldn't be a simple bailout or a vindictive rejection. It would be something more nuanced, addressing both past wounds and present needs. I texted Heather, "I'll meet with everyone tomorrow at 2 p.m. Have Mom and Dad at their house. You and Ryan be there too." Her response was immediate. "Thank you, Amber." "Thank you so much." I spent my final day in Portland preparing. I visited my company's legal team to draft necessary documents. I spoke with financial advisors about structuring potential assistance. I even consulted a family therapist about setting healthy boundaries. As the meeting time approached, I felt surprisingly calm. The anger and hurt weren't gone, but they no longer controlled me. For the first time in 14 years, I was walking into a family situation with clear eyes and on my own terms. The doorbell to my childhood home felt foreign under my finger. I had rehearsed this moment countless times, yet nothing prepared me for the flood of emotions as the door swung open. My mother stood there, thinner than I remembered, her once vibrant red hair now gray and sparse from chemotherapy. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Amber? Oh my God, Amber." She reached for me, then hesitated, uncertain if physical contact was welcome. I made the decision for her, stepping forward into a brief, awkward hug. The familiar scent of her perfume, the same brand she'd worn my entire life, triggered a rush of memories, both comforting and painful. The living room had been rearranged, with fewer furniture pieces creating an illusion of deliberate minimalism rather than financial necessity. My father rose from his recliner, looking small in clothes that hung loosely on his frame. Heather and Ryan sat tensely on the couch, while a dark-haired boy, Nathan, played quietly with blocks in the corner. "You came," Dad said, his voice rough with emotion. "We didn't think." "I'm here to talk," I said, remaining standing as everyone else sat. The power dynamic wasn't accidental. "Heather called me about your situation." An uncomfortable silence fell. Finally, Mom spoke. "We didn't want to burden you with our problems. You've built such a wonderful life." "Let's be honest," I replied. "You didn't reach out because we haven't had a real relationship in 14 years. Not since the college fund incident." The words hung in the air, the elephant in the room finally acknowledged. "I've spent the past week investigating your financial situation," I continued, opening my laptop on the coffee table. "I know about the failed business investments, Mom's medical bills, the foreclosure, Heather and Ryan's debt, and Nathan's therapy needs. I've verified everything independently." Their expressions ranged from surprise to embarrassment. Clearly, they hadn't expected such thoroughness. "Before we discuss anything else, I need to hear from each of you. I need to understand how you got here." I turned to my father. "Dad, you first." My father's story emerged haltingly. The furniture business had been declining for years due to online competition. Rather than adapting, he'd made increasingly desperate attempts to maintain their lifestyle through risky investments. "I was too proud to admit I was failing," he confessed, staring at his hands. "Now I bag groceries for people I used to play golf with." Mom described her cancer diagnosis and treatment, the terror of facing mortality while watching their financial security evaporate. The medical bills just kept coming. We started choosing between medications and mortgage payments. Ryan explained how his real estate career had collapsed after a lawsuit from dissatisfied clients. Rather than rebuilding slowly, he and Heather had maintained appearances through credit cards and loans. We thought the market would turn around. By the time we realized how deep the hole was, it was too late to climb out. Throughout these explanations, Heather remained silent, tears streaming down her face. When her turn came, she could barely speak. "I don't even know where to start," she whispered. "The money, your college fund, it wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was part of a pattern I can see so clearly now. I always took and took, never thinking about consequences." She described years of reckless spending, enabled by our parents and fueled by a sense of entitlement she now recognized as toxic. "I kept thinking happiness was in the next purchase, the next vacation, the next house. I dragged Ryan into my delusions. I dragged everyone down." Looking directly at me for the first time, she added, "The worst part is what I stole from you. Not just money, but opportunities. A relationship with your family. I can never make that right." As they spoke, I observed Nathan from the corner of my eye. His movements were slightly uncoordinated, his focus intense on the structure he was building. A beautiful child caught in circumstances beyond his control. When they finished, I finally sat down. "Now it's my turn," I said quietly. For the next 30 minutes, I told my story, the one they had never bothered to learn. The tiny apartment, the multiple jobs, the exhaustion and isolation. The kindness of Professor Collins when my own family had abandoned me. The years of grinding work to build my company. The loneliness of holidays spent alone while they continued as a family without me. The day I discovered my college fund was gone wasn't just about money, I explained, my voice steady despite the emotion beneath. It was the moment I realized I wasn't valued in this family. And the dinner afterwards, when you all laughed about it. That showed me I wasn't even respected. My mother began to sob quietly. My father looked physically ill. Heather couldn't meet my eyes. I built a successful life despite what happened, not because of it. PredictX now employs over 100 people. Our valuation at the last funding round was $78 million. I let that sink in. I have the financial means to solve all your problems with a single wire transfer. Hope flickered across their faces. But I won't do that, I continued. A bailout without accountability would solve nothing. You'd be back in trouble within years, maybe months. I opened my briefcase and removed several folders. I'm offering a structured intervention with conditions attached. If you agree, I'll help. If not, I'll walk out that door and we can all continue as we have been. One by one, I outlined my terms. For my parents, I would pay off the mortgage arrears and restructure their loan, with the condition that they complete financial counseling and stick to a budget I would monitor. I would cover Mom's medical expenses directly to the providers, ensuring she received proper care. For Heather and Ryan, no direct financial assistance except for Nathan's needs. Instead, a job offer for Heather at the Portland branch of my company, starting in an entry-level position with the opportunity to advance based solely on merit. For Ryan, connections to reputable real estate mentors who could help him rebuild his business ethically. For Nathan, a special education trust that would cover his therapy and educational needs through college, structured so that neither Heather nor Ryan could access the funds for any other purpose. These offers come with one non-negotiable condition, I concluded. Family therapy. All of us together working through 14 years of dysfunction with a professional mediator. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Heather spoke. "You have every right to turn your back on us," she said softly. "This is more than generous. I'll take the job and work harder than you can imagine." My father struggled visibly with his pride before nodding. "We accept your terms. All of them." As we worked through the details, I felt neither the vindication nor the warm reconciliation I might have imagined. Instead, there was something more complex, the beginning of an honest relationship built on reality rather than obligation or illusion. Before I left, Nathan approached me shyly, offering a block from his collection. "For you," he said, his speech slightly halting. "It's blue. Blue is the best color." I accepted it solemnly. "Thank you, Nathan. I think blue is the best color too." That small connection, untainted by past betrayals, felt like the first truly genuine moment of the day. 6 months after that fateful family meeting, I found myself back in my parents' living room, this time for a scheduled therapy session. Dr. Levine, our family counselor, sat in what had become her usual chair, notebook open, as we discussed our progress. The changes were both subtle and profound. My parents' house now had a fresh coat of paint. The garden was coming back to life, and inside, the atmosphere had shifted from desperate survival to cautious rebuilding. "Amber," Dr. Levine began, "you established clear boundaries and conditions for your help. How do you feel about the family's progress so far?" I considered the question carefully. "There have been genuine efforts," I acknowledged. "The financial restructuring is working as planned." Indeed, the structured assistance had already shown results. My parents were 4 months into their financial counseling program and adhering to their budget. Mom's medical treatment was proceeding without the added stress of financial burden, and her latest scans showed promising results. The foreclosure had been halted, and they were now current on their mortgage payments. "It's been humbling," Dad admitted, a word that would have been impossible for him to use 6 months earlier. "Learning to live within our means, to distinguish between wants and needs. At my age, these shouldn't be new concepts." Mom reached for his hand. "The relief of knowing I can get my medications without choosing between that and electricity. I can focus on getting better now." Heather's transformation had perhaps been the most surprising. She had started in the customer service department at Predictex's Portland office, answering phones and handling basic client inquiries. Rather than complaining about entry-level work, she had thrown herself into learning the business from the ground up. "I've never actually earned anything before," she confessed during the session. "Everything was given to me or taken. This is different. When I got my first performance review and it was positive, I cried in the bathroom for 10 minutes. Her supervisor, who had no idea she was my sister, had recently recommended her for advanced training. I had stayed completely removed from her professional development, allowing her to succeed or fail on her own merits. Ryan had connected with the business mentors I'd introduced him to and was rebuilding his real estate practice with a new emphasis on ethical client relationships. Their house had been sold in a short sale, and they were now renting a modest apartment, living within their means for the first time in their marriage. The downsizing was actually a relief, Ryan shared. No more pretending we were something we weren't. Nathan's progress had been particularly rewarding to witness. With consistent therapy now guaranteed through the educational trust, his speech had improved dramatically and his frustration levels had decreased. He had started kindergarten with appropriate support services in place. "He has friends now," Heather said, genuine wonder in her voice. "Actual playdates. Before, he was too frustrated to connect with other kids." Dr. Levine nodded encouragingly. "And how are the deeper family dynamics evolving? We've talked extensively about the patterns of favoritism and enabling that contributed to the breakdown. This was the harder work beyond financial restructuring. In weekly sessions, we had excavated decades of family dysfunction. My parents had confronted their preferential treatment of Heather and the damage it had caused both of us, her through entitlement, me through rejection. Heather had examined her history of taking without consequence. I had addressed my own tendency toward emotional isolation as a protective mechanism. I still struggle with trust, I admitted. There are moments when I brace for disappointment, waiting for the old patterns to reemerge. That's to be expected, Dr. Levine assured me. Trust is rebuilt slowly, through consistent actions over time. Mom spoke up, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "The hardest part has been facing how much we failed you, Amber. Not just with the college fund, but throughout your childhood. We favored Heather so consistently that it became our normal. We didn't even see it." "I saw it," Heather said quietly. "I exploited it. I knew exactly how to get what I wanted, and I never considered how it affected you." She looked at me directly, something she had struggled to do in early sessions. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know that I understand what I did now." These acknowledgments, impossible 6 months ago, represented genuine progress. The family mythology had been dismantled and replaced with painful but necessary truth. 1 year after my initial intervention, we gathered for a different kind of meeting, a small celebration of Mom's latest scan, which showed no evidence of cancer. The backyard barbecue was modest by previous family standards, but authentic in a way our interactions had never been. Nathan, now 6, proudly showed me his collection of blue objects, stones, toy cars, crayons, that he had gathered since learning it was our favorite color. The simple connection between aunt and nephew had blossomed into something special. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself in the kitchen with Heather, preparing a salad while the others were outside. "I never thanked you properly," she said, carefully slicing cucumbers. Not just for the financial help, but for the job. For the chance to prove something to myself. You've done well, I acknowledged. Your supervisor says you have potential in client relations. It's the first time I've actually worked for anything. She hesitated. I keep that blue block from Nathan on my desk at work. Whenever I feel frustrated or entitled, I look at it and remember what matters. Later, watching my family interact, still imperfect but now guided by awareness rather than denial, I reflected on the journey. The betrayal of my college fund had altered the course of my life, initially through devastation, but ultimately through determination. Would I have built Predict X without that galvanizing moment of self-reliance? Would I have discovered my own strength? Family relationships were still a work in progress. Trust was building slowly, like a structure being carefully reassembled after collapse. There were still difficult moments, misunderstandings, and occasions when old patterns threatened to resurface. But there was also something new: accountability, honesty, and genuine effort. The family therapy continues. My relationship with each family member is evolving at its own pace. With Mom, there's a tentative warmth. With Dad, respectful distance gradually yielding to understanding. With Heather, a complex rebuilding based on adult terms rather than childhood dynamics. And with Nathan, the pure joy of a relationship unburdened by past pain. I've learned that forgiveness isn't a single moment, but a process. It doesn't require forgetting or minimizing harm. It doesn't even necessarily mean reconciliation in all cases. Sometimes it simply means refusing to let past wounds determine your future actions. The college fund betrayal will always be part of our family story, but it's no longer the defining chapter for any of us. We're writing something new now, something more honest and ultimately more sustainable. If there's one lesson I would share from this journey, it's this: true success isn't measured by bank accounts or business valuations. It's measured by our capacity to break destructive cycles, to respond to pain with wisdom rather than reaction, and to build relationships based on truth rather than convenience or obligation. I'd love to hear your thoughts on forgiveness and family boundaries. Have you ever had to set firm conditions on your relationships? Did it lead to healing or further separation? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to join our community of people navigating complex family dynamics. Thank you for witnessing my journey, and remember that sometimes the deepest healing comes after the most painful betrayals.